I think, one of the things we should talk about first up is, looking out across the geopolitical crises that we see now, we are seeing a threat to globalization as we've known it over the past several decades. The Russia-Ukraine conflict and the resulting Western sanctions. At the same time, we see growing protectionism and the securitization of trade and investment as countries move to sort of shore up their self-reliance. How will countries manage to navigate the sort of complex web that we see of things that are militating against globalization? And what do you think the impact will be?
Globally, the liberal order needs to be updated to meet contemporary challenges. Many countries in the region are focused on economic development and poverty eradication, and they want to choose what works and don't want to choose sides. And then we need a coherent and credible strategy to win the hearts and minds. To make digital rules effective and attractive to many countries, however, we need three conditions, I think. One is the high-level rules in itself. And then two is the combination with market access. And three, effective enforcement supported by a guardian power. And this leaves the TPP with the US back in as the only option, I'm afraid.
I think one important lesson we can take away from this already is that interdependence is a source of strength, not a source of weakness. That is, if we don't have this interdependence between Russia and the global economy, Russia and Europe, United States and Europe would not have military, not have any weaponry except for military options. Australian exporters have been able to find other export markets, and that is largely due to the open multilateral trading system, being able to find other markets. So the system has acted as a buffer for the Australian economy, and it works as a buffer for other countries. It blunts the use of economic weapons, and it really diffuses economic and political power.
Right. I think what we are witnessing, and this is where I put on my hat from the region and the part of the world that I come from, South Asia, where actually this entire idea about how much a multilateral trading system is able to secure and cover the distress and the anxiety that is being witnessed right now. And I think, Susan, the biggest challenge over here is that medium and small economies continue to be anxious over the fact that conflicts are going to become more commonplace.
The US return to the TPP will solve many problems. And we must not forget what the TPP was for in the first place. In the WTO, as Wendy described, free riders can veto every update of rules and stall efforts for us to restrain state capitalism, for example. And then the thinking behind the TPP was to really gain leverage by creating a framework with like-minded countries outside the WTO.
I just don't see the WTO being able to produce those types of outcomes that they did in the past. And that is going to mean that different groupings of like-minded countries will need to come together and to forge rules among themselves, and hopefully leave the architecture open so other countries that are willing and able to, live up to the rules would join over time.
I know that, we've had discussions over the last few months about the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework of the United States, and also the difficulties that the US is having politically to pursue market access opening and trade agreements. So maybe if you could just respond, Wendy, to some of Naoko's comments.
They have recognized that if we want to be part of the Indo-Pacific region, we can't just rest on our security ties and our political ties and our people-to-people ties, that we need an economic agenda. But the success of the IPEF, in my view, it's going to be based on whether the United States can attract other countries in the region, particularly other countries in Southeast Asia and South Asia, including India, because these are the countries that they haven't signed up to all this stuff yet. There's now what's so welcome about the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework that now in Washington we're calling the IPEF is that it's going to take a flexible approach. So it's not going to say you have to join everything or you can't join. That was kind of the CPTPP approach. It's going to be more like the Digital Economic Partnership Agreement, which is different modules and says to countries, you can sign up for some of the modules, some of the pillars, but not the other ones. And I think that will help.
Of course, Australia and Japan, but not just Australia and Japan. I think the rest of the region really does want and really need the United States locked into this part of the world economically. I think that's in all our interests, including the Chinese interest. Many in the region don't want to choose between the United States and China. And for this to be a successful initiative by the United States, it should be an initiative that strengthens multilateralism and deepens interdependence. And I think all the things that Wendy said are spot on, and Naoko, and that's what I think the focus has to be.